Thanks, everybody, for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come for the second annual AI and Wireless Day. Given this is not going to be an annual recurrence, we're going to give it a name called Aira Activate AI and Wireless. That's the idea. And I'll kick it off a little bit, talk about the schedule. There are a few changes on the schedule, and then I'll turn it over very quickly to Fan, right? When we started this last year, the reason we started this is to have a conversation around the potential opportunities for what AI could do in a wireless network, specifically in the cellular network. And the reason we started that conversation, I wanted to have that conversation, is in our conversations, we're a startup, by the way, a small venture-funded startup, but in our conversations with operators and partners around the globe, many of whom are represented here, what we noticed is every customer was getting a slightly different perspective depending on the partner they spoke with, right? If it was a silicon vendor, they got one perspective. It was a network equipment vendor, they got a different perspective. If they were a RIC supplier, they got a slightly different perspective, right? And we felt it would be useful just to have a day talking about all of the various perspectives such that our ultimate customers, operators, could get a view and a framework in how can they think about AI and wireless. So that was the idea. Basically, shed light, illuminate, that's it. That was the goal. And so there was a pretty good success last year, and we got resounding feedback that people wanted to see it happen again. So that's really the purpose of today. It's not selling. McKinsey would not allow us to sell. They're co-sponsoring this with us. They have a hard rule against selling in their environment. So this is not a day for selling. It's really a day for sharing insights and learning from each other, right? So with that as the context, we will use Chatham House rules. There's nobody here that's going to be writing anything about what occurs here. Feel free to share your insights, good lessons, bad lessons. The point here is to learn from each other. And we've kind of structured the day so that that'll hopefully occur. And there are some formal sessions. There's a lot of breaks in between. And the intent is to have those breaks facilitate collegiality and conversations. And please take advantage of those, right? So that's the context, right? Last year also, when we started this, there was a lot of questions about the general good buzz about AI and wireless. And when we started this company, Aira, 4, maybe 5 years ago now, right? Ravi and I started it, and we had this vision that there's a tremendous opportunity to apply AI and wireless, right? And we got told by some very knowledgeable VCs, people who knew about wireless, yeah, you guys are stuck between Moore's law and Shannon's limit, right? A very clever way of saying you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? And that's a true quote, by the way, from a VC whose name I will not take, right? They did not invest in us. That's their loss. We've had subsequent investors who will see a benefit from that. But 4 years later, fast forward to MWC 2024. MWC 2024, everybody is talking about AI and wireless, right? There's this notion of AI native RAN that was talked about at MWC 2024. And all of a sudden, we were not the lone voice in the woods. We were part of a chorus. And so clearly there's a lot of interest, and legitimately, because AI can have a pretty significant impact on the performance of networks. We've seen it. We'll talk about some of that. Others will talk about some of that today, right? And just to underscore the importance of AI, I found it shocking that the Nobel Prize this year in physics, as well as in, I think it was chemistry, right? Both were recognizing AI leaders, right? Dennis Hassabis in one, and the guy who invented the network, Hinton in the other one, right? So pretty significant. And I think computer scientists and mathematicians can't actually be eligible for a Nobel Prize. So I thank the Nobel Committee for finding a workaround so they can actually recognize some very interesting work. But I wanted to highlight that because I actually believe there is a huge opportunity for AI impact in wireless. There's a huge opportunity for AI to impact productivity, and that's ultimately what drives GDP growth. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend here, Fan. Fan is a partner at McKinsey, deals with the telco practice, and they're going to talk a little bit about their broad-based view of what happens in telco operators. Without further ado, Fan. Chris.
Awesome. Thank you, Anand. For those of you who haven't met, my name is Ben. I'm a partner based out of our Seattle office.
Can I do one more?
Yeah.
I did want to thank these guys because they've been very graciously opened up their facilities here 2 years in a row. So that's courtesy McKinsey. I also want to thank our Amazon friends, AWS. They are the other co-sponsors of this particular event, and they help pick up some of the tab. So thank you.
Wonderful. But Ben, I was just saying, partner based out of our Seattle office. I lead our telecom network practice globally, but really excited to have everybody here. I think last year the discussion was very interesting, drove a lot of great kind of action coming out of it, and really look forward to this year repeating the same. So I think Anna just asked me to spend 15 minutes and give a little bit of a bird's eye view of the industry and how they're thinking about AI and how we are talking to some of our kind of clients who are leaders in this space. But just want to share, 4 main messages during the next 15 minutes, right? So one is, stressing that change is mandatory, right? I don't think this is something that, as Anand said, is a nice to have, or like it has some benefits. It actually is required, right? Networks are really hitting a limit in a lot of cases, and AI is the big unlock that can bring us, to the next level. 2 is like AI is really revolutionary, right? There's a lot of incremental use cases out there, like doing a little bit here, 10% there, 5% here. But I think the real leaders in this space are thinking about AI very different as a revolution in how we manage our networks and how we use the data within those networks. 3, you talk a bit about like there's a long way to go. I think we're very early in our journey, right? We're just scratching the surface in a lot of ways. But how are people thinking about going in that journey? And finally, just taking a bit of inspiration from others in other industries, right? What does this mean? And what is people who have gone on this journey in other industries? What are some of the key success factors that they had to think through? Maybe just to kick things off on point number 1, change is mandatory. I think many of you know, and some of this is obvious, but look, data is growing. Obviously, costs are continuing to increase. Tower rents are going up, labor is becoming more expensive, spectrum is becoming more expensive, ARPUs have been flat, and there's pressure downwards in a lot of places. But this is unsustainable. But I think also at the very bottom, it's important to recognize that the old way of building networks has, in a lot of cases, reached its limit. I mean, this depends a bit by client, but anywhere from 10 to 20% of macro sites can no longer be split. There's just not enough places to go. The small cell kind of economics really don't work yet, right? But the current way of doing things is kind of hitting a wall, or will hit a wall sometime in the next, 5 years in many locations. And so this really requires us to rethink a bit. How do we operate our networks? How do we design it from the bottom up in a way that is much more scalable and much more future-proof going into the future? Okay. So with that, look, there's a few elements of the network of the future, I think, to think through, but just to highlight a few of these, right? To solve kind of this bottleneck in networks that we see coming up, number 1 is I think we need a massive way to increase scale and quality of the network. We see kind of networks evolving towards smaller and smaller sites with much higher density, but much lower unit costs. I mean, this has already happened in many places, right? In Asia, like in India and in China. China Mobile has 2 million cell sites versus, players in the US have 70 to 90 or whatever, somewhere in that range, right? But if you think about where China is today, it's basically the US in 5 to 10 years in terms of the data density, right? And we kind of need to come up with a system and a way to get to that higher site density without exploding our cost and blowing up our business model, right? But really it's, supporting higher traffic, higher availability, but also on the other end of this, very much around being able to introduce new services, have new features, and in many cases take advantage of the data that's in the network, right? This is everything from preventing catastrophic failures. I think it's happened in Canada and Australia and in many places, through to being able to introduce new features and really monetize some of that data in the networks in a better way. So kind of all of this put together is just saying, I think AI will play a very big role in unlocking a lot of these things that telcos need to deal with around the world. One analogy I just want to draw to is data centers. And I think, telco networks are along a similar journey, but, kind of earlier in the evolution. But if you really think about data centers, right, in 1990s, these were the custom built, bespoke, big, monolithic kind of data centers. This has evolved into, something in the 2010s, more akin to, an automated, but still need people to manage them. It's still a bit customized using a bit of legacy infrastructure to, I think, where cloud has evolved to today, right? Which is, completely modular, interchangeable pieces that is more or less 100% automated. But I think networks need to go on this similar journey because once you get to the end, it becomes infinitely scalable, right? Of deploying smaller and smaller units in a much more automated environment that allows you to scale your infrastructure to places that you haven't been able to in the past, right? What does this mean for telcos? It really represents, and in the data center case as well, a foundational change to how we think about how, our organizations and networks operate and how we kind of structure our work, right? In the past, if you think about, by the way, networks has been one of the places where AI has been adopted very early, right? You guys have been automating, using data forever. But I would characterize kind of in the past, it's always been this notion of people at the center and AI supporting people, right? It is people are the ones who do stuff and AI are the tools that make them more efficient, that help them provide better data, which is great. But I think people are really starting now to think through a paradigm shift. And this is a little bit the data center model on the very far right? But it is AI at the center and people supporting that AI, meaning, it is computers and technology that does the work. And all people do is they troubleshoot what goes wrong, right? They help improve it, make it better whenever exceptions come up. And they continuously improve this AI and this machine in the middle that ends up doing all the work. But it's a very big paradigm shift to everything from, how you design your architecture to how do you staff your people to what are they doing on a day-to-day basis to your entire operating model and incentive schemes. But this is a pretty foundational shift that we're seeing early signs of leading operators going down, right? And this really is a vision that, several of my clients are kind of set for the future. Obviously, I think this is paired with, and I'm sure many of AI tools have gotten a lot better over time. And this is more from a software perspective, but it's relevant here as well. But it's in combination of an explosion and quality of the tools out there that are available to people. Just maybe give some examples, and I think I don't want to spend too much time on individual use cases because I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time talking about this for the rest of the day. But just to highlight a few of the big transformational changes that could happen in the network, right? But everything from build all the way to run. But the way that networks are built today, like I mentioned, are still in very many cases large monolithic kind of custom designed towers that are placed, very specifically with careful design, and with kind of very manual processes throughout. Kind of we see a future where it's much smaller sites using machines to optimize exactly where to build and how, and completely streamlined from end to end, right? On the run side, there's still a lot of, again, human interventions, right? There's tools to help them, but many, many human interventions. It takes a long time to access data or the customers. I think in the future, again, fully automated. It is AI driven at the core, and using AI, you really, and I think Ant will talk about this a bit later, but able to access the network data. So it is, streamlined from build to run to really making sense of everything that is happening in the network and being able to pull that data out and use it for other you can use it to build new businesses, you can use it to understand your customers better, but it is end to end being able to understand that data better as well. Maybe just a couple of examples of use cases, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. Again, one example of this is obviously in the NOC, right? Being able to streamline and automate everything. One of the problems in the NOC today is that, it manages all kinds of legacy systems out there. There could be 50 legacy systems in the network. Each of them require different knowledge, different kind of language to speak to it. Gen AI can help streamline all of that and tie all of that together, right? So not only can it access each of the systems, it can pull data from it, stitch it together, and use it to help automate the NOC to the extent, get rid of ticket duplication, give data people, like automate a lot of the issue resolution, give people, all the data that they need, and really be able to manage this complex array of legacy systems in a much more streamlined way. If you think about energy, there's a lot of kind of cool features. I'm sure we'll touch on later today as well. I think last year we had a whole session on energy, but around applying AI to not only better manage and, to switch on and off, but to understand what the business impact of spending the energy is. So what customer impact does the energy spend have, and where can we optimize around that? In the field, we've seen this in many ways, but it is, one of the, just to highlight a couple. One is on forecasting, right? I think this shows the blue line is kind of AI model forecast. In the past, you were able to get to, 1 week ahead or a few days ahead kind of accuracy. But now using AI, you can get to, 15-minute increment with 95+% accuracy forecasting. So you can much better manage your field force. And coupled with that, you can think about a field force that is, now you have your standardized sites, so you can apply tools and have co-pilots for the technicians out in the field to really be able to have anybody go to a cell site and do things. And so in the future, there could be a change in operating model where you have general contractors that, have gone through a 1-hour training, but with the co-pilot can work on all of your cell sites or a wide array of issues. And you can set up an Uber-like model for field services. So this is leading to a revolution for how people think about, doing work out in the field. I think this is, I think this is slightly outdated, but Aira is doing also some really cool stuff, like I mentioned, around extracting data out from the RAN and being able to, write code for various systems. For me, the holy grail of this whole thing is, being able to really integrate and write code for all of your legacy systems, extract out the data and stitch it together so that you can come up with customer level insights extraordinarily quickly, right? But to give you an example, like in the past, it would take a week to say, hey, I want to, figure out a profile for XYZ person, right? What are they doing? Where are they going? What apps are they using? It would take 3 engineers a week to go through that process, right? You would do it sometimes for like police investigations and stuff like this. I think with AI, you can do it in 15 seconds, right? I can type, I want to profile this customer, everything they do. It would take 15 seconds. It is powerful as much as it is scary, because you now have unlimited access to, petabytes of data that go through every day, to anybody that can type a simple sentence into a prompt. And that kind of power is powerful, very scary, but if controlled and contained in the right way, you can imagine, again, new businesses being built out of this, right? This driving the commercial engine for the rest of the company, and of course, being able to apply it to your own operations and making things much more efficient. But again, we're at the very early stages of this, but I think it can be very powerful to access everything that's going on. So just in the last few minutes, I do want to mention, like, we are very early in the journey right now, and there's a lot of learning and kind of experimentation that needs to happen. This is a little bit of an example of what happens in software companies or sort of software developers. I think very much the same for network engineers as well. But, when you introduce, this is kind of adoption of a tool, right? When you introduce a tool, you kind of have these trainings and adoption goes up for a few weeks, but then by month 3, no one's using them anymore. And nobody's really changing the way they're working or adopting it into their, day-to-day work to really drive that productivity, right? And you have statements like, we're just going to give someone a co-pilot and we expect productivity to double, right? And like, these statements are just not true, right? It's as we say in all of these, getting the people stack right and the change management and changing their behavior is just as important as getting the technology stack right and making sure they have the right tools that can do what they need, what they need it to do. I won't spend too much time on this, but I think there's a lot of learnings on how to make this happen, and a lot of companies are still experimenting. But just to highlight a few of these, there's a huge component of mindset shift that needs to happen, right? If you think about the concentric circles of moving from people at the center to AI at the center, it's a pretty big shift to like how people work day to day. Like what kind of job are they doing, right? What kind of skills do you need, right? We've seen organizations go from, 10% data scientists to we think 50, 60% should be the norm in the future, that people know how to work with data and are software developers essentially. But there's a huge mindset shift to what that means to my day-to-day work. A lot of people are scared, right? How do you excite them rather than scare them? There's a huge shift in culture that's needed. So a lot of this will become test and learn, because if you think about their core job now is not doing something. In the past, you needed to do something with like 95% accuracy. In the future, it is the machine does something wrong and you have to iterate and quickly test and learn and figure out what went wrong and try to fix the problem. So you have to be okay with failing and be okay with experimentation. It's a very different mindset to have than people have today. And like this whole thing around skills, like people have to become multilingual. They have to know the business or know the technology and then know how to work with data and know how to work with AI. But no, we're still very early in this. We're trying to learn. But I think, I think we'll get to in some of the sessions today, but I think lots of good momentum in a lot of places gives me a lot of hope for where this is heading. So let me pause here. I think lots of exciting discussions to come. Really look forward to the day. And, thanks everyone for visiting our office. But hand it back to Anand.
Thanks, Fan. I will point out we did not pay McKinsey to put that advertisement for. There's no way we can afford them, right. But thank you. We will take it.